Well, hey everybody, it's Rowan and Mike again. We're so delighted to have these conversations with you leading up to the Christmas break here in Australia, at least, where most of Australia will hopefully be able to go on holidays. Most of Australia will hopefully be able to travel between most of the states as best as we can. So we're looking forward to that. Uh, Mike has already made it to the Sunshine Coast. He's been there for a couple of years. I'm moving my family there next week, and we just want to be able to add some value to you and have conversations that just pick up this idea around what can we do to actually lead and deal with some of the tough stuff when it comes to particular kinds of people. So while we introduce that, what we've been aiming to do over these few lives, and we'll be picking it up into next year as well as best as we can. And we appreciate all of the connections and the feedback. And we know people watch live, and we know most of you watch afterwards. And so wherever you're watching, we hope you get a lot of value out of this. But we want to deal with some of the tough stuff, deal with the things that we don't necessarily see leaders being intentionally and purposefully trained to do, and to understand the mindset and the perspective and the way that you could approach certain things, knowing that you've got a better than average chance for this conversation to go well. Because typically when it comes to the challenging conversation, we end up defaulting to our most natural state. And we'll talk about that today as well. So when it comes to conflict, typically you'll default to your most natural state and what you learned at home. And this becomes a real challenge because other people do these things differently. And you know that we talk about our partnership, our consulting partnership with Giant Worldwide, and the Voices framework for understanding how you lead and how you are experienced. Today is a really important part of that, because when we talk about this idea of the hard to lead people, or as you'll see here, this idea of how to lead the difficult people, leading difficult people, what you'll notice is that it's not always the difficult person's, I'll say, fault by way of introduction. But often it's that they don't know what it's like to be on the other side of them. And they don't necessarily know what their default position is when it comes to the hard stuff, conflict, resolving issues, negotiation. That's what makes this even more challenging. Now, I'm delighted as always to be on the line with my business partner and friend, Mike Hardy. Mate, how's it going? What's happening? And what are you thinking about this idea of the leading difficult people idea? What are your thoughts and reflections?
Well, it's a pretty important conversation, because anyone who's ever led anyone will know that the hardest person to lead, first of all, is yourself. And then second of all, realizing that when you recognize your own inhibitions, when you recognize your own limitations, your own tendencies, and we've been talking a fair bit the last few weeks about those components, that these are also in our team players too. And if we can understand what's happening in people that we're finding to be difficult, which is normally signs like resistance, or for some reason they're sitting back and they're not engaging, and we're trying to work out, why is there not like a flow here? Why is there it feels like once there was chemistry, now there's not chemistry. I don't understand what's happening here. And you're walking away going, they're a difficult person. There's always something sitting behind that. And when we can understand what's happening for people, this is a very powerful thing that actually helps us better serve our team, actually improve influence to be able to help us get where we need to go as a team or an organization. So it's an important conversation to have.
Agree with you, mate. I love what you said about there. Like everybody that's ever led anyone, all these really kind of high end, sort of big idea words. It's so true. So what might it look like, or in what way might it be a problem, do you think, if this kind of hard to lead idea? Well, I think the first one is if the other person can't see it, or they won't see it, and they are different things. Now, when it comes to being difficult to lead, I would actually suggest that most people aren't trying to be difficult. Most people are being themselves. And what the challenge is, we just don't know that because I'm a pioneer connector creative in the voice order, I'm all about being good at your job, all about getting things done, all about taking others with you, all about future, all about execution and pace. These sorts of things become really, really important. Now, other people on my team, so the nurturers, for example, would be very focused on how people feel about the experience and the situation. Guardians will be particularly interested in what the process or the steps are. I don't really have a natural inclination to those things. And if I won't see that my leadership's having an impact on people, or I won't see that other people have other perspectives that we've got to take into account towards getting the job done, then I could actually trigger people and be the difficult person to lead or the difficult person to be led by. So, what I'm really trying to argue here is that it might not just be a won't see it, but it might be that they can't see it because we don't know what it's like to be on the other side of us. And we'll talk a bit about that just before we go into the next part of this self-preservation model. I think the other place this becomes frustrating and challenging is then when you've got the low responsibility response, like, I didn't know, it's not my fault, they didn't tell me, you should have made me aware, or that's not something that's in my position description. The low responsibility response makes somebody really hard to lead. And you can imagine, again, one of my most favorite metaphors for all of these conversations is the elite sporting team, where somebody doesn't quite lead at the level that they're required to. And then what you do is you hear them say, well, that's not really my fault, or that's not my job, or that's not my responsibility. Well, unfortunately, at this level, these things become really, really important. And now what I want to invite you to be thinking about is that perhaps this behavior is actually driven by more than just what you and I see. Perhaps this behavior is driven by something deeper in the person. And again, I will argue that by and large, most people we lead and train and the clients that we work with, most people aren't getting out of bed every day and saying, gosh, how can I be difficult today? How can I actually be the really hard to lead person? And this becomes a very important part of the conversation because there's deeper things going on for people. There's deeper things that they need to be able to understand about who they are and how they function. Mike, this whole idea of like knowing yourself to lead yourself, talk to us about the idea that these tendencies and patterns unpack deeper parts to who we are as leaders and as people. What's your view and experience of that?
Yeah. Well, the reality is every single one of us throughout life pick up patterns of behavior. We pick up what we call our tendencies as we have to navigate through life, and we have to make sense of scenarios as children, and how are we going to survive in this, world of, unexpected dynamics that's at play. How are we going to, relate to other people in the playground? And as we grow up, we pick up these behaviors that are either, we're preserving ourselves, the self-preservation kicks in, or we're actually, putting ourselves out to the world. And so we end up picking up these behaviors. And if I show you just, on the screen here, you actually be able to see here that here is this big idea that we often talk about in our programs. It's called know yourself to lead yourself. And the concept is that the more that you know yourself, the better you can lead yourself. And so in this particular tool, the reason why we have the infinity symbol is because we're saying for the rest of your life, you need to come to terms with the fact that you don't arrive. You don't just read a book on self-awareness and become self-aware. This is a daily practice of reflecting and saying, what are the tendencies that are at play in my behavior? Because if I'm aware of those, then I can work out what are the strengths, what are the positive tendencies I've got that's actually helping me lead and navigate life and team life in the way that I hope to. But then what are the negative tendencies that I've picked up that are maybe not serving me well? that are not serving my team well, that are actually undermining my ability to have positive influence with others. And so when we talk about leading difficult people, sometimes the problem is ourselves. We're part of the contribution. And so our lack of self-awareness could also be playing into somebody else's lack of self-awareness. And then you get this clash where we both don't really know ourselves very well. So how this works is we have these tendencies. Our tendencies are shaped by nature, nurture, and choice. Okay. And they play out as we grow older. And then they become patterns of behavior. So your pattern of behavior may be to walk into a team meeting and just sit back and be quiet and just internally process. But as a result, that's creating a certain action that leads to a certain consequence and creates a certain reality. So you're stuck in your head and you're reflecting, you're holding back because of perhaps perfectionistic tendencies. You don't want to say your idea until you know it's perfect. But as a result, you don't get opportunities because no one ever hears your ideas or thoughts or opinions. And so they think you're disengaged. And so that's an example where your tendency may be undermining your ability to be in the reality or have a particular reality that you're looking for. So you want to reverse engineer this and do some reflection and say, what are these underlying tendencies? And this is so incredibly important as leaders. We have to do this, and we want to help our team members do this. And if you've got a difficult person on your team, the goal would be to lead them in a way that they can self-reflect and be using a tool like this, the Know Yourself to Lead Yourself tool, and say, what do you think your tendencies are? And how do you think they're serving you? And when we become aware of them, it can help us. I've got tendencies. My tendency is to jump in on people out of enthusiasm and share my ideas before somebody else has fully shared their idea. That is undermining my ability to have positive rapport and relationship. And it's undermining someone else's ability to be able to fully express. Now, if I'm unaware of that and I'm not paying attention to that tendency, that's not going to serve either of us very well. But if I'm aware of it, I can interrupt that natural, it's not so much natural, but that tendency that I've picked up or that pattern of behavior, and I can lead myself in a way that's going to get a great result for both the other person and for myself in that relationship. And so this is why this is so important to understand when we're talking about difficult people, Rob.
Absolutely, mate. I totally agree. And this is why this becomes important. And we want to be a bit counterintuitive in this live today, because this is often looking at the hard to lead, or the difficult person to lead, and lumping all of the responsibility on them. What we're wanting to actually do is give you a tool as a leader in just a minute to understand that there are some things going on for every single one of us, that when you've got some elegant questions that you can ask and elegant understandings, then you can actually unpack this a little bit more with people along the way. But again, before we go through that, Mike's done this the last couple of times. We live and lead through the lens of our voice order. And when it comes to how we lead and how we are, and how we lead and how we are led, then that we default to our voice order. We default to the characteristics of our voice order. And each foundational voice has a different way of handling the different issues. And so the idea of understanding what your foundational voice might be and what that does when it comes to the challenges is really, really important. And Mike will take us through most of these, but as an example, the nurturer voice is a present-orientated, people-focused voice. If they have any sense that they're not welcome or their opinion's not important, they will simply go quiet and slowly withdraw from what is happening. And so one of the ways that we unpack this with people is say, beware the silence of the nurturer voice. And that person may not be involving themselves in meetings. They may not be responding to the emails. They may not be giving the enthusiastic response that you're really looking for, because that's what we do around here as a team. But they're doing it because they're feeling disconnected from where the overall culture and tone of the team is going when it comes to people and how they feel. So that becomes a really important part of understanding. And Mike's going to help us understand the lens of the voices before we introduce you to one simple tool that will uncover why people might be difficult to lead. Mike.
Yeah. Okay, so Ro's going to talk us through. So he's going to drop into the chat or into the comments below a link for the 5 Voices assessment. And it's a free assessment, and it's going to give you access to a whole bunch of incredible personal development and leadership and team development resources. So I highly recommend you do it just for that. And it's free too. So most people go like, this is ridiculous how much incredible stuff there is there. So I highly recommend you do it. When you take the assessment, the link will be below. The assessment has 80 questions, and it's going to then tell you what your 5 voices order is. So there are 5 voices. We have all 5 voices. Okay, so I am nurturer, creative, guardian, connector, pioneer, and so are you. However, there's an order, and we have a foundational voice, which is the way that we have learnt to communicate, to behave, and to experience and relate in the world around about us. And so for me, my voice order is I'm a first voice connector. That's the voice that's most, it's my sort of unconscious strength, you could say, or the way that I just behave without even thinking about it. It feels very natural to me. My second voice is the creative voice, which I use and access very easily. My third voice is the pioneer voice, which I also access relatively easy, not as much as creative and as my first and second voice and connector. But then my fourth and fifth voices are what we call our growth area voices. My fourth voice is normally the one that I'm the most unaware of because I just never really think that much about it. For me, that's the nurturer voice. And then my fifth voice is the guardian voice. Now, because I've been on a long journey of growing in my fourth and fifth voices, I see those at play sometimes in my life, and other people experience that sometimes. But if you're unaware and you don't know how to grow and develop in those areas, that'll be why they sometimes feel very foreign to you. So as a real quick high kind of level overview of this, I'll give you a snapshot. Ro kind of introduced us a tiny bit to the nurturer, but we use the metaphor of voices as a way to talk about the force by which other people experience our communication and our behavior. And we talk about this in terms of voice volume. So the quietest of the 5 voices is what we call the nurturer voice, and they are the champion of people, relational harmony, and values. And they're often the most loved people on teams. If you happen to have a first voice nurturer leader, then they are often very loved. Everybody knows that they're their greatest, cheer person and support person, and they really, really care about you. That's just extremely obvious. Again, that's not to say any other voice can't do that too, but it's just you really feel this from nurturers. They are present-orientated people. So 2 of the 5 voices are present-orientated, and 3 of them are future-orientated. And by that we mean that's like the starting place in your kind of brain and the way that you see the world. You see the world from the future and where you want to be, and then you work your way back. Or you kind of can't proceed into the future until you feel like the present is well looked after, well cared for, sorted, organized, and we've got a good plan to be able to proceed into the future. So the nurturers represent 43% of the population. So if you have nurturers in your team and you're not hearing their voice, because they're often the ones who you hear the least, because they often don't speak up. They often don't tell people, either because they don't feel confident to, or they don't feel like they get a chance to. So it's very important that we understand what's happening for them. So that's incredibly important. That's the nurturer voice. The second voice is the creative voice. They are the champion of future ideas, innovation, and organizational integrity. They represent 9% of the population, and they are, you can probably expect this, but they are future orientated. Then we have the third voice in order of voice volume, and they are the guardian voice. Guardians, you'll pretty much always hear their voice in meetings. They love to ask their questions and to sort of dig into the details of, is this a good idea? Have we thought this through well? They are the champion of due diligence, of resources, and efficient systems and processes. They love a good plan. They love to make sure that the I's are dotted and the T's are crossed, and that this is going to be a solid plan that we're putting forward. They represent 30% of the population, and they, like the nurturer voice, are present orientated. Then we have the 2 of the loudest of the 5 voices. And then in this, we have the connector voice. They are the champion of relational networks, collaboration, and effective communication. And they represent 11% of the population, and they're also future orientated. That's my first voice. Then Rowan's first voice is pioneer, and this is the loudest of the 5 voices. And the pioneer is the champion of strategic vision. They are results focused and they love to problem solve. And they represent 7% of the population, and they're also future orientated. Now, the reason why this is so important when we're talking about difficult people is that statistically, and it doesn't have to be this way, but statistically, connectors and pioneers are disproportionately in leadership positions. And so what happens is you end up getting, 82% of the population very often. If you have an unaware connector and an unaware pioneer who are leading, these two voices can dominate the airways. We have lots to share. We've got lots of ideas. We bring lots of energy. But as a result, sometimes guardians, creatives, and nurturers don't feel heard. They don't feel like their contribution's being valued. They feel like they're sort of, there to do what the leader says they should do, rather than feel like they can really collaborate and be part of the team. And it's a disservice to connectors and pioneers when we don't hear the other voices and their contribution. And that's why we love this tool, because we're trying to say every one of these 5 voices is critically important to the health, to the stability, and to the forward progression of any team and leader. And so if you want to help lead a difficult person, then you want to first discover your own voice, but then secondly, you want them to discover their voice so that we can both become more self-aware and work out a way to work together in incredible collaboration, valuing the way we're wired and bringing the best out of each other.
It's such a useful frame of reference to understand that you, as a leader, bring a particular kind of approach to things. And when we teach this to clients, I kind of laugh on the inside, because we have these conversations and we get to the point where I say, you understand, there are people in this room and they're supposed to make you feel that way, right? And you're supposed to make other people feel a particular way. We naturally trigger each other, and not that we love it, but we still do it. So what's our answer? What do we do about this? And we'll jump on and talk about this together as well. But why might it be hard to lead someone and not know that it's hard to lead them, or not know why it's hard to lead them? And the tool we wanted to introduce you to today is this tool called self-preservation. And self-preservation is really just being able to answer the 3 specific issues as to why somebody might be doing something that in coaching world we call unresourceful. Before we talk about those, and Mike and I are going to riff about those just for the next sort of 6 or 8 minutes, and then bring this in to land again, and thank you in advance. Before we talk about the actual behaviors of self-preservation and how, as a leader, you're not just about performance managing these, but you're about looking out for them in everyday life, leadership, and teaming experiences. What I want you to pay special reference to is we're looking for relational equity and influence and impact. What we're looking for as a leader, what we're looking for as a team, is to actually stay closely connected to each other and get really good things done that we can be proud of, and point to that work and say, look what we accomplished together. So as a leader, what we want to be able to encourage you to be thinking about is, if there's anything that's taking away from the relational equity in the team, if there's anything that's reducing your ability to have influence or impact, we are honor bound as leaders to be able to have a look at this and then decide what it is that we need to be doing about it. So if the particular challenges are being faced, then what we do is we jump on and we go, okay, let's look at doing this a little bit differently, because the relational equity in the team is going down. The ability for us to have influence and impact is going down. And a person might be, bring Mike back in, a person might be having these challenges because they're afraid of losing something, because they're trying to hide something, or because they're trying to prove something. And before we rush in and necessarily hold that person accountable for that behavior, we need to be asking ourselves these questions. So, Mike, we teach this tool a lot. Take us through What goes on in your mind when you're leading someone, you're seeing them do something that's not resourceful, and unpack this tool for us in that particular context? How do you as a leader use this tool to get to the bottom of what somebody might be doing that's making them difficult to lead?
Yeah. Well, as I said earlier in the conversation, I think the starting point is always yourself. You got to actually look at yourself first. And I think when you can look at yourself, self-reflect, if you can be kind to yourself, because being harsh on yourself doesn't help you grow. And being harsh with somebody else doesn't help them grow either. What helps people grow is when they know that we're fighting for their highest possible good, when we're offering the support and care that they need, and we can demonstrate that we're totally for them. That's the most important thing. And once someone knows we're for them, then from that framework, we can be curious. Why is this person stuck? Or why is this person not engaging? And so we ask these questions not from a judgmental perspective, but we ask these questions from a curious or an exploring perspective. And these questions are, what am I afraid of losing? Well, I need to ask myself that question. But what's this person on my team? They're not behaving in ways we want them to. They're stuck. They're not moving ahead where we'd like them to go. What is happening for them? And sometimes there are very real fears. Someone's afraid that they're going to lose their job. So they're not developing their team because they're like, well, hang on, if I develop someone on my team, that may mean I do myself out of a job and I can't see any other positions in my current vision for what's going to happen to me. They may show me up and show that I've been, I haven't been up to scratch the whole time. And so we're trying to protect that part. And if we can find that out and we can actually demonstrate through our own vulnerability, but our own care that we're for them and we want to see them succeed and flourish in their role, sometimes that can just unlock the person in a really healthy way. When I'm thinking about a question like, what am I trying to hide? I'm thinking, well, yeah, I've tried to hide things in the past. I mean, sometimes it's appropriate. We don't want to sound ridiculous. So we should close our mouth and not share every single opinion we have to demonstrate, our foolishness. But there are other times when it's really important to share our ideas, but it may be the fact that we're worried that someone's going to think we're not competent enough or we're not capable enough. And so we hold ourselves back. And there's every chance that this could be happening for someone in our team. And so if we can speak to this and we can say to them, hey, you don't have to worry. I'm for you. Like if you're afraid of something or you're trying to hide something or there's something that, you don't want me to be aware of or the team to be aware of, let's chat about that. Because sometimes these things get caught up in our heads and we blow it way out of proportion. And then sometimes it is, we're just trying to prove something to someone. We're trying to prove that, we have this story in our head that we pick up from when we were young because someone, told us that we were going to be, that we were no good or we'd never achieve much or, we weren't very smart. And so all of a sudden we're living out this story, which is, I'm going to prove to them that I'm successful. I'm going to prove to them that I can be the head of this company or the head of this team or the smartest person in this division. And so we're living out this kind of story, trying to impress someone. Maybe it's our parents or maybe it's even ourselves. And if we can let go of that and we can guide people through our own sharing of our own story of how we've done that, this can really, again, the wall of self-preservation begins to come down. And this is where we see relationship and influence and impact begin to increase and take place. And so I think that's just so important for us to understand.
Yeah, this is so helpful. And again, I want to labor this a little bit because typically we use this as an evaluation tool. But I think as we look at this as a leader, you can look at somebody's behavior and say, are they demonstrating behavior where they're afraid of losing something? Or are they trying to hide something like a competency issue? And I'm not talking character and integrity issues like that. I'm talking the fact that, even just before this live today, I was talking with somebody in New Zealand. We talked about imposter syndrome. Like these things are normal life and leadership issues. So what does it mean in terms of how do we actually do it? If we talk about this idea as What are we afraid of? What are we afraid we might lose? What are we trying to prove? What a leader needs to be able to do is ask authentic, humble, and non-judgmental questions. Now, that does not guarantee that everything will go perfectly well and swimmingly. But the leader that does do this effectively, what we notice that you're actually able to have those robust, difficult, challenging conversations with your team day in and day out, because you all understand you've got to take responsibility for the temptation that you will have to be in self-preservation. And you know what to do to ask somebody about the idea of they might be afraid of something, they might be losing something, or they might be trying to prove something. So what we're encouraging you to do as a leader is to develop strong observation skills and strong questioning skills. Now, the other side of that is that if you simply look at the behavior, but you don't look at the deeper challenges and the deeper issues, you may just simply performance manage, evaluate, or respond to a person's behavior without understanding what they're about and what it is that they can do differently as a result. This is actually a really, really useful, and if I show it to you again, a really useful tool to have conversations with people about performance management, about being able to stretch and push into things that help you be even more courageous. Now, as we are just coming to land, this whole idea, bring Mike back in there. This whole idea of is expounded in our programs that we are taking people through. We've got numbers of clients around APAC where we're having these kinds of conversations. If this is something that you're either watching live or watching afterwards, then we'd love you to get in touch with us about booking a program, book a call to have a bit more of a conversation about our fit, your problems, and how we can work together, or tell somebody about us and put us in touch. We would just appreciate that so very much. We're grateful for your time. We're grateful for your attention. We never take it for granted. Mike, what are your closing thoughts, mate?
Yeah, my closing thought is, we talk about this every single time we do our training. If your intention as a leader is to see your team liberated, to see the culture of your organization liberated, then you've got to make the commitment and have the mindset to fight for the highest possible good of your team players. When your team know that you are for them, then they relax. There's much more psychological safety. And they're probably going to be much more willing to do the self-reflection and to do the work that they need to do, because they're actually seeing that demonstrated in you and in me. And so remember, leaders go first, not because we should be first, but because we do the hard work first. We do the self-reflection first. We courageously put ourselves forward to serve and to do that hard work, the difficult work of growing and developing first. And we do that as an example to invite others to say, hey, I'm willing to grow. I'm willing to self-reflect. I'm on this journey for the rest of my life, and I'd love you to come on this journey with us. And when people feel that and sense it, creates a really great environment for flourishing and growth. So very exciting to have this conversation with you if you'd love to chat to us more.
So we want to say thanks. Thanks, everybody, for your time, for your attention. We just appreciate it. We never take it for granted. Looking forward to a fabulous run into Christmas, a brilliant start to the new year, and a wonderful year ahead for all of us. Thanks, everyone.